Hey everyone, it's Peter from Daydream Nation, and I've got Joe B back to the channel. How are you, my man?
Oh, always great, especially when I'm on your show. So thanks for having me on again.
It's great to have you back on the show, Joe. I had to get you back because I wanted to have a bit of a chat about the new Rolling Stones album, Hackney
Yes.
Diamonds. So this is the 24th album of the Rolling Stones. It's had about 5,000 YouTube reviews. A little bit divisive. To be quite frank, I haven't really watched many of the critiques or read many of the critiques. I've listened to this album a ton of times during the last week, and I think you've got to listen to an album, I don't know about you, Joe, more than 3 or 4 times just to get the feel of it, because I think with a lot of YouTube out there's like a rush. We've got to get the first review on, but you may miss something. So it's all about listening. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about our first impressions of the album, the good, the bad, and the indifferent, and just talk Rolling Stones. So, Joe, I'll throw it to you. First listen, first run through. What was your impression of the album?
I liked it a lot. It grabbed me immediately, and it grabbed me in a way like, okay, they're doing. I get. So the only review I saw was Martin Popoff's, and we hold them close to our heart. So I had that in mind, and so there's certain Rolling Stone tropes. I had that, realizing that's happening, but it's all good. I listen to it. I listen to it again. I really like it. It reminds me of what Van Halen did with A Different Kind of Truth. It reminds me of what Judas Priest did with Firepower. They're giving the fans what they want. It's what Aerosmith did not do with music from another dimension. This is what I was hoping they would do. It's not what Iron Maiden did with their latest album, which I mean, I don't know. I can't listen to that. The songs are way too long. But yeah, this album hit me, and I like it a lot. And I go way back with the Stones. They're kind of like it's kind of like my dad's music, but I was always into it, and I've seen them live 4 or 5 times. And I saw him back in the day on the Tattoo You tour, I think it was. Yeah.
Oh, great.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, but they still bring it. And I first listen, it pulled me in, definitely.
Yeah. I guess the first listen for me, I was kind of unsure in respect of what my feelings were. So that's why I had to listen to it a ton of times over the last week just to.
Well, I'll tell you what, sorry to interrupt, but when I was listening to it, I was going to the gym to work out. When I got into the parking lot, I'm in a group text with a bunch of guys I went to grammar school with. I've known these guys since I was, 6th grade. So what, 12 years old, 11 years old. And I text these guys and I'm like, it's 2023 and the Rolling Stones put out a great album. And that's all I said. Then they started, replying. So
and going off on their various opinions. Look, it's certainly had a lot of chatter and a lot of interest. There is a bit of a nostalgia value that, hey, the Stones, they're in their late 70s, early 80s. They're still putting out material. A lot of the tracks brought a smile to my face. It's like putting on a warm pair of slippers, the Stones, they're still around.
yes,
When many of their contemporaries have, fallen off the perch. So it's novel. How many bands that started off in '64 are still around? Jeez, there's
right.
not many. And if they're still around, they wouldn't have any foundation members. So
Right.
that's a big tick. There is a big nostalgia element to this, but there's also a lot of rose-colored glasses. I'm reading a lot of reviews like it's the best album since Some Girls.
I
I don't. Yeah.
I don't like statements like that. I'd have to give it even more time to make that type of evaluation. What I do like about it is the one thing I've always admired is the way Mick keeps himself in shape. So I feel that the fact that he keeps himself in shape, and these guys, even though they're multimillionaires, they're still badasses at heart, right?
Mm,
And Mick keeps him, and I feel it's still genuine here because Mick keeps himself in shape and he can still do it, and it's a great rock and roll album,
Yeah.
not great, but I maybe great's it's a very good rock and roll album that has pulled me in.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's
Yeah,
best you approach reviewing or listening to an album is you've got to blinker yourself from what other people are saying because there's been a lot of grandiose type comments. So it's best since this, best since that. And at the
I
end
mean,
of the
Steel
day,
Wheels was a pretty darn good album, and that was a big comeback
yeah,
album, right?
look,
Yeah,
well, to be fair, I think the last great album, in my opinion, was Tattoo You. That was like stone cold, almost 10 out of 10. But the subsequent albums, they've been pretty strong. Dirty Workers was a disaster, but a lot of their albums, Bridges to Babylon, Steel Wheels, three-quarters of the
Steel
album was
Wheels was
very, very
huge.
strong.
Yeah, they've had 3 or 4 comebacks. They just keep on doing it, but
Yeah,
Steel Wheels brought them way back into the fold, and then they started playing shows with Living Color and Guns N' Roses. So
yeah, yeah.
that was a huge album. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. But there's a lot of nostalgia. They haven't put an album out for 15 years. When you've got a band of that vintage, a lot of people are willing it to be good. You know what I mean? It's
right.
like you're waiting for a comeback album and you're just willing it that it's going to be a masterpiece. It's going to be good. So I think a lot of people, their critiques, they may be really favorable now. But my question is, will you be still playing this album in a month's time? Will you still be playing it in 6 months' time? Will you be playing it in a year's time? Because I'm telling you, there's a lot of Rolling Stone albums, the last 5. I've played it about 5 or 6 times. I don't mind it. I file it away and I don't really go back to it. When I go back to a Rolling Stones album, I listen to Exile on Main Street or Sticky Fingers or Let It Bleed or Beggar's Banquet. I go to the
Right.
Mick Taylor era.
Yeah.
Are people that are raving about this album, and I'm just a question to the audience, are they sincerely going to go and repeat play this and play it with those other albums, or is it going to be filed away? You've got to ask yourself.
So to answer your question, I would in a month, yes. In a year, maybe. This could probably be my second favorite album this year. I'm trying to think. My favorite album by far is the Greta Van Fleet album, and that took me about a month to really get into. As more I listen to it, the better it gets. But this is up there, and I'll listen to it as far as new releases.
Yep.
But I like what Andrew Watt did as far he's bringing as a Stones fan what I want. It's a filter. I'm comparing it a lot to the last Iron Maiden album, believe it or not. But I know the musical styles are completely divergent, but I feel Steve Harris went way off the rails on that last album, Senjutsu, and it's way too long and boring. And they needed an Andrew Watt to say, okay, hey, here, the fans want to hear, Remember the Beast again, that type punchy, write a 3-4 minute song, that kicks ass, not this epic bullshit. So
yeah. All right. Well, just one more comment before we go into a deep dive, and then I'll sort of flash out my concerns and go over the positives and negatives. The more I listened to it, it became apparent the quibbles that I had with the album were serious quibbles, and the positives became really positive. So it's sort of like on both ends of the spectrum. Why don't we just do a bit of a dive in the album, and I'll talk about some of the songs, and my views will become more apparent as we go into it. So the first track that was on the album is Angry. What did you think of Angry when?
Well, yeah, it grabbed me as first. Obviously, it was a pre-release, and it's a great opener, and I'm like, this is one of the best Stones songs I've heard in a while.
Yeah,
as you said, time is so relative with the Stones because they've been around so long. So in a while, is that 10 years? Is that 10 years in the Rolling Stones life is minuscule compared to other bands, but.
Absolutely.
I would say it was one of the best Rolling Stones songs I have heard
in a long time.
In a long time. It's a good assessment.
My issue with this song is the drum sound. It's very mechanical. It's processed. It sounds synthetic. Now, Charlie Watts, his playing is very specific to the Rolling Stone beat. He plays literally a second behind the beat.
Yeah.
So I'm so used to that sound. And when I listened to this song and I heard that drumming, it kind of put me a little bit off key because it sounded very processed and mechanical. And in the production with Andrew Watt, the bass sounds very muddled. So that's part of the Stone song soundscape. You know, the Stones I like the Stones where they're a bit loose, ragged, a little bit organic. But this song, to me, it's a good song, but the production polishes it and it makes it really smooth. Jagger's vocals are very upfront in the mix. They're very shouty. It's like he's right up to the microphone. So he's right up to the microphone. The instrumentation's like right back. But the thing that got me was the drums.
I could see that point. It doesn't bother me as much as it bothers you.
Mm.
So I don't know if it's just by circumstance, but Andrew Watt was in I love that California Breed album, and that's where he really got to start. He didn't produce that album, but I for some reason I'm hearing that sound, and I like the California Breed sound, but it also is brick walled. So I'm agreeing with you, but it doesn't bother me as much as I think it bothers you.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
As we get deeper, there's a few things that bother, but folks, it's not all doom and gloom because there are some nuggets in the this album. So strap in. Okay, so Get Close. Incidentally, Angry's got a co-write from Andrew Watt. It's interesting.
Right.
The producer's got a co-write on the first three songs.
Yes.
Get Close. What I like, it's got the Rolling Stones sneer vocally because I love it when Jagger's got the attitude and his vocals. I don't like Jagger singing saccharine. I like it where he's got a little bit of attitude and he's got a little bit of sneer in the vocals. And the thing I like about this, it's got that Mick and Keith harmonizing. You know,
I noticed though, and I don't know if it's because of the album, the Hackney Diamond title, but I've noticed, and you never really heard his British accent is pronounced as this. That's the one thing I noticed with his vocals.
Yeah. I didn't. That's a fair point. Do you think that is maybe something that Andrew was encouraging? I think he's got a certain style. He's very much an interventionist producer. Patient Number 9. Now, I ranked that as my favorite album of last year with Ozzy Osbourne. A lot of people didn't like that album, but to me, it's the Andrew Watt show. And it was perfect because Ozzy Osbourne wanted to have a 70s rock album that sounded like, what you would hear on AM radio. And there was a little bit of crunch. But my quibble with this album is the Stones have a very specific sound, which is ragged, a little bit behind the beat. It's loose, always in the pocket, but he smoothed it. And to me, that is a negative. It's not the Stones that I like. I like it where they're ragged.
But he's grabbing, go on.
Yeah.
He is grabbing, though, old Rolling Stones sounds in these songs, and we'll get to one coming up. But I totally agree with you, but it doesn't bother me as much because I'm focusing more on Andrew took the old classic Stone sound and kind of made it modern. Maybe that's what you liked about Patient Number. See, I couldn't listen to Patient Number 9. Well, I can't listen to Ozzy's voice. That's why. But
do you think there's any auto tune with Mick? I think I detect a little
like
bit.
Yeah.
I don't mind it. I don't think that's a negative. And whatever you do to color in the production, because being a producer you're kind of like an artist. And if there are holes that you've got to color in, I'll do it. And I think that's fine. just finishing off on Get Close, I don't mind this song at all. It's got a bit of an early 70s vibe. So I wrote down Exile on Main Street, and James King does the sax, and it brought a shiver up my spine. I thought, oh, Bobby Keys. I love it when they bring a little bit of sax into a Rolling Stones song, a little bit of, bit of sass.
So he's bringing back that 70s.
Bringing back. But my quibble is the production. It's a bit muddled. The drumming is very processed. There's not that separation of instruments. I kind of miss, I miss Charlie anyway. Next one is Depending on You, another Watt composition. I loathe this song. I hate it.
Really?
To me, it's a mawkish ballad. It reminds me of something that a band like Hot House Flowers would do. It's got the orchestra, the strings, and the organ. To me, it just doesn't convince me. I don't, it's sort of like pseudo power ballad. I don't believe that this is the sort of material that Rolling Stones seriously would have their heart in. The arrangement drowns the song. I don't like it at all. Oh, sorry. What do you think?
Again, I'm not really disagreeing with you, but it doesn't bother me as much. I don't mind it. I think it's a good. It doesn't really ruin the listen for me, because obviously I kept on listening to it, and I think it's with the flow of the album. But I can see where you're coming from. It's interesting because I'd say you're 100% correct, but it doesn't bother me as much.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
But I'm just, again, Watt is the co-write, and I get the feeling that a lot of the stylistic choices, he definitely has a bit of a say in it, because this ballad on this album, Depending on You, there are some stylistic choices that are very similar to Patient Number 9. I can't remember the song, but just the arrangements, very, very similar.
I'm hearing that. I'm hearing some California Breed, but I'm also hearing like what they did with the last Judas Priest Firepower, where they took different eras of the band and said, okay, you're going to sound like this.
Yeah.
And see him saying that. And the one song that's coming up, we'll definitely. Yeah.
I don't like the Stones doing mawkish ballads. I want them to rock out. I want them, Keith's not mawkish.
Yeah.
Where was Keith? Keith in the sessions. If Keith was there, he'd go, hey, Mick. To me, like the Beatles, Lennon and McCartney. McCartney was saccharine. Lennon would be the one to say that, Paul, that's no good. I always get the feel with Jagger and Richards. Richards would be the one that would be saying, the quality control. So maybe he was out of the studio. But I just think this is such an not a typical Rolling Stone song. It's a little bit ballady, a little bit syrupy, and I just don't buy it. The next one, my friend, is an absolute cracker of a track. Love it. One of my favorite tracks on the album, Bite My Head.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney's kind of sounding like Lemmy. Right? His bass is like so. When has Paul McCartney? It's like heavy metal bass. It's great. You can imagine that they're just smiling and they're having the time of their lives. Now, Paul was only in for the day, and it was a full day apparently, and they had a ball. So all of this acrimony between the parties, it's all theatre, guys. They respect, they love each other, the Stones and the Beatles, and it all comes. There's a perfect synergy here. I love that bit where he's about, whether it's just before the bass solo or after it, he goes, come on, Paul, show me. He does this little voiceover. How do you feel about that? That actually kind of, I don't know. I kind of like, you know what? Did he really need to say that?
I don't mind it. But Jagger's vocals, it's kind of punky. He's kind of got this snarly sneer. It's shouting. It's really aggressive. I love it. Yeah, it's one of my favorite songs on the album. So we agree with that. Whole Wide World.
Oh, this is my favorite song in the album so far. It's got that, I don't know, is it this shattered flanger guitar sound? I don't know. This song really brings me in. I love this tune.
I think it's smooth and polished, but I forgive it. And
Yeah.
Ronnie
Is it
Wood
that
plays this solo that's, I thought, is Eric Clapton playing? It's a very Clapton-esque type of guitar lick.
yes.
Actually,
But
folks,
it is a guitar song that he grabbed from their past, from some
yeah,
girls. Yeah.
folks, the guitar work on this album is great. Richards and Ronnie play superbly. So all the way through, their guitar work is top notch. Good pop rock song. It's catchy. It's upbeat. It's earworm because that song's been in my brain all week.
Question for you though. So I'm sorry, but you bring up the guitar work. How much How much is Andrew Watt playing on this album? How much do you think? They would never tell us, but he's a great guitar player. And how much is he filling in the gaps? You know.
Look, I think you can hear enough of based on past Stones albums to know who's Ronnie, who's Keith. I know what chimes in, but unless they're doing something very like AI or behind the scenes, and that may be a whole new different show. To me, it sounds like the actual Stones guys are laying down the licks. So, yeah, so I've just got to attribute it to Wood and Richards are playing, and they're playing really well, and it's a positive on the album. But that's a great track. I give you that one. Dreamy Sky. Oh, love it. These are the high points of the album when the arrangement is stripped back and they're doing acoustic stuff. This is what I love. This is a big tick, tick, tick. Acoustic slide, beautiful. It's got that country blues feel to it. I like Jagger's vocals. He's got kind of a world-weary feel to it. Looking back on his life and singing with just really raw emotion. And the thing that I love it is when Richards comes in with his gravelly voice and they do a little bit of harmony. That's just pure bliss. What do you think of this number?
Oh, I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. So far, I mean, I like every song. I know you don't like the Depending on You, but it's a great respite from the rockers. And it just sounds like he took, though, I know there's songs in the Stones past that have this sound, and it works here. I love the slide guitar. I love the dual vocals. I just think it's a great, I enjoy it quite a bit.
Yep. All right. Mess It Up. This song has a riff that reminds me of something that they would have on Tattoo You. So you've got the chords, and then you've got Jagger singing over it. Charlie Watts on the drums. And the chorus goes into this kind of a dance swing that is very now. A lot of the modern rock, it not only has to be four on the floor, modern rock is you've got to have a bit of groove to it, a bit of swing to it. And the bass line is reminds me of Miss You. It's very florid bass line. Yeah. So I don't mind this song, but it's very modern. And it's got a bit of a dance groove to it.
Right.
So
what do you think plays on this song?
What's that?
Is this one of the songs Charlie plays on? Yeah,
Charlie plays the drums.
I agree with you. This is like a Tattoo You era throwback. I really like.
Yeah, from Tattoo You.
Yeah, so. Definitely. It works. So far, this whole album is working for me. Yeah. But the drums, you know what? To your point, when you brought up the original drum sound, I think it makes a difference here. You can tell that he's playing the drums here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to hear that 1 second just behind the beat.
Right.
Where he's in his own little pocket, but it works for the Stones. The Stones about being ragged, but that's what I want to hear. Live by the Sword. This has got Elton John on the keys. This has got Bill Wyman on the bass. It's got a lot of swagger. You got Ian, it reminds me with Elton doing the piano of the great late Ian Stewart. I love those piano lines that he used to do with all the early 70s Rolling Stones. It's got a great Ron Wood searing guitar line. Jagger has this vocal line that's just so tasty. I reckon this is a catchy riff, and it's up there in that era of Exile on Main Street. What do you think of this song, "Live by the
Exactly.
Sword"? I think it's another
Yeah,
tick.
definitely. They took a sound. Yeah, they took a sound from the past. It sounds great. I like the fact. It's interesting. It seems like the older Elton John gets, the more he wants to rock out. Like he wants. Although last time I saw him, he played mostly ballads, but it's great to hear him play on this album and play on a rocker. And it's and great to hear Bill Wyman, into the fold and this song too.
I love Bill Wyman.
Yeah,
love his bass licks.
Yeah, so the album is firing in all cylinders for me up to this point.
Yeah, but this is a great song.
Like and the lyrical, people, well, it's not, these old multimillionaires are trying to be angry and it's like, but you know what? Like I said, they're still badasses. Mick still stays in shape, and you know what? I could see it being genuine, him feeling this way. I know guys that are successful but still are pissed off at the world, and Mick, here, hell, where I live, one of his girlfriends, he bought a house like 20 minutes from me for her, and she's like in her 30s, right? So I mean, that's Mick Jagger.
Yeah,
he had a kid with her. So
I mean, they're of an age where a lot of their mates have fallen off the perch, the contemporaries. So they've got a lot of real emotional interest vested in this album. So there's no denying there's some real emotional bangers in this album.
Yeah, you wonder how much Charlie Watts passing away plays into it too. I feel that. Yeah, I feel like Mick is being genuine with his lyrics here in this album.
I think that was the biggest. I mean, they've had a lot of stumbling blocks over the time. Brian Jones in 1968, Mick Taylor leaving the band, that would have been another hurdle. But I think the loss of Charlie Watts would have just affected them like nothing else. Because, he's been there from the start. Driving Me Too Hard. Sorry, mate, I don't like it. I put down Traveling Wilburys. It's like a Traveling Wilburys B-side. I don't like it. It's got this very familiar melody that I've heard before. And again, you've got the bass and the drums are sort of muddled. And I can only point the finger at what. There's not that clear definition. It's just really muddled. Man, I've got the CD. I've listened to it on my stereo, listened to it in my car. I've tried all these different audio mediums to see, is it the equipment I'm using? It's all the same. It's just that bottom end is just really muddled, and it kind of taints a few of these songs. What do you think of this song anyway? Driving Me Too Hard.
So one thing I haven't done is I haven't gone back into the Stones collection, because the beginning sounds exactly like one of their favorite songs, and I got to find back. But I have to agree with you here. It gets kind of the production has that muddled, and I'm thinking of the California Breed Brick Wall. Like it kind of has that. Maybe I have to listen to that Ozzy album again to do a comparison as well. This song is average at best. The Traveling Wilburys. I didn't think of that.
I just got that traveling. I don't mind the Traveling Wilburys, but when they're all singing and harmonizing, middle of the road. I don't
the
like
beginning
it.
of the song sounds like one of their famous tunes.
Yes, I can't put my finger on it.
So they're grabbing old, like with Hold Wide World. I don't know if it's Shattered or something. They have that guitar sound, so they're grabbing old sounds or Andrew Wattas and incorporating it into these new songs.
Yep. All right. Tell Me Straight. I love it. A lot of critics don't like Keith's songs. I like Keith's songs. I love his gravelly voice. I may be contrarian. I love he's very emotive. It's straight from the heart, and he calls it as he sees it. He's one of those characters, a spade is a spade. If he doesn't like something, he'll tell you. And there may be a little bit of auto-tune processing on the song with his voice, but it's still gravelly enough that I put this in the positive and give it a tick. The lyrics are quite, thought-provoking. How do we finish? How do we start? So this song is all about, Keith, where are we? I'm really at this age, he's looking back at his life. He's looking about now. I think it's a very powerful, emotional song. And it's one of Keith's better ones. So I love it. What do you think of this song?
I totally agree. It just is something that is genuine. It sounds like something Keith Richards would write today, reflecting on his life. And I like the gravelly, the quality of it. It is a slow song, but it grabs me because it's so genuine. It sounds like he's really into it. So I like it. And, if it wasn't Keith Richards, I'm thinking, if it wasn't for Keith Richards grabbing a song or two, singing, and I love his songs when he sings, you wouldn't have Joe Perry singing for Aerosmith, occasional songs. You wouldn't have Ace Frehley singing occasional songs for Kiss. I mean, it just, he opened it up for other bands.
You are right.
I mean,
you are spot on because you don't have to sing like a choir boy. It's just how you emote and how you just give the song all. It doesn't have to be melodically brilliant, but you know, as long as you're emoting and connect with the audience, and I think this really connects.
Yes.
Joe, Sweet Sounds of Heaven. I think this is the best song on the album. It is a tour de force.
Okay.
It reminds me back square into Exile of Main Street territory, where it's gospel, it's evangelical, it's classic Stones, where they're firing on all cylinders, and I think they're putting maximum effort into this song. So you've got the guest stars like your Stevie Wonders and Lady Gaga. I love this song. It's just so uplifting. And even though it's the second last song, it could be the last song, because, when you put a last song, it's always let's finish it off with a cracker of a track. What do you think of this song?
I have to disagree with you here. I just can't get into it. I got to listen to it a little bit more. And I love when the women sing with, do 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 do, or they needed a Gimme Shelter here if they're going to grab Lady Gaga and do something. That's what I was hoping for when I saw she would sing this out. So it's not doing much for me. I'm going to give it more of a listen, because I'm definitely going to listen to it more and more, because I like the
but
as far as me, it's very strong up to this point, and then it kind of like, I don't know. I was expecting more.
Okay. All right. That's cool. And the very last track is Rolling Stones Blues, Muddy Waters. And I think this is a nice little bit of synergy, because, their main influence is the blues, Americana, the American blues. And why don't you finish off the album as to what inspires them, what actually got them together in the first place? It's a nice bit of a perfect circle.
It used to drive me crazy because, when I was this is before when I was real little, Chicago was like a record recording capital. They had Chess Records, and the Stones would record in Chicago and be influenced by the blues. By the time I was in the rock, all that moved to LA. Now it's in Nashville. But and I worked with a former guy who was a producer, and then he went into another business. He didn't want to move to Los Angeles. Alice Cooper used to send him Christmas cards. The point being, I like this. It goes back to that Chicago via Mississippi blues that influenced the band right off the bat. So it's it's a great ending to the album. So I think the only song that really doesn't sit well with me is the Lady Gaga tune.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and that's your favorite song. So
yeah. Well, out of the 12 songs, I think six are outstanding. 3 are good songs, but just the production lets it down, and the rest are maybe a little bit average or below average. So that's my view on it. But I definitely have some strong concerns about some of the production choices on the album, and it's what I do miss is the bass and the drums. That really kind of spoils it. But I can listen to it.
As far as the production, do you feel it's even possible to not have this type of production in 2023? Because are we comparing product? You know, do they need to go back to a Sound City and have a board and everything to make it sound that way? Is this how? Because you know, Dave Grohl did it with one of his albums, but you know, but I don't know if it's even possible with all the, you know, what do they use now? I'm blanking on names, but everything's, you know, on a drive and
well, you got Pro Tools
Pro
and
Tools,
various things like that.
Yeah.
I think they can. I think, but there has been a definite direction that they've taken on this album to make it modern and align with modern rock radio. As I said, when I first heard this album, I was quite unsure because a lot of the sound choices on this album sounded very much like what you would hear with, you know, modern rock, which doesn't align with the classic Rolling Stones sound. So I think there's been a deliberate choice to go in that direction.
Which begs the question, though. I mean, has there been any recordings that have that classic sound recently? Because like, even like I bring up the new Greta Van Fleet, which I really like, but my one reservation with that is I would have loved to hear like Bob Ezrin or Eddie Kramer grab a hold of this album, because there's times where I'm like, I want to hear more of the guitar and bass. It's kind of lost. And I'm wondering if this is more a product of 2023 than you know, is this how albums have to sound now? I mean, do they need to go back? You know what I'm saying?
Like, let's face it, this band goes back to the 60s. To have a band that's rooted in a very organic, you know, like those early albums were on one track, putting songs that could be stripped down and much more effective and over arranging it and mixing it in a sound, you know, in a way that sounds very now, is kind of awkward and a little bit jarring for the listener, especially when they're used to the sound, the Stones that are a little bit ragged and a little bit, you know, sort of more organic sounding, a bit more edge to it.
Yeah.
Examples of modern classic albums, some of Deep Purple's last albums, with Bob Ezrin. I'm not talking about the covers album, but So What? Infinity sounded organic to me. Had that sort of warm sound where there was separation of the instruments. So,
well, a different kind of truth, I'm thinking, but I mean, now we're talking 10 years ago, right? Yeah, I don't know. The one thing I do like about this album is like, and I know people are going to start probably throwing things at the screen right now, but I go back to that Iron Maiden album, and it can go the other way too. And they needed someone like an Andrew Watt to like cut it short and keep it simple, and because it can go off the rails too if you let them do what they want, or there's no direction. I know people like the album. I can't listen to it. I mean, you know,
well, this album's 55 minutes. It could have been trimmed one or two songs, couldn't it?
Right, but they're all like
12 instead of 12 tracks. It could have been 10. I'm a big stickler.
But I like the fact they're all like under 5 minutes, except for the last song. You know.
Yeah, I'm a big stickler that I think an album beyond 45 minutes is a little bit of a strain on the old attention span. And unless you've got a stone cold masterpiece and you're putting a statement out on a double album, to go beyond that, you've got to be really secure in your material. I'm not a big fan of the CD age where let's cram everything in the 70 odd minutes of what's on the disc.
Yeah. I agree.
This album could have been better. Maybe 2 songs trimmed off and it's a tight 10 instead of a loose 12.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So how would you compare it to? I mean, I don't know. You talk about their latest releases. So you have
A Bigger Bang, better than A Bigger Bang.
Better than Bigger Bang.
Yeah, 15 years ago. I think it's. I have to think about that, but I think it's. I would give this album probably a 7 out of. I'd give it a 7 out of 10.
I would give it a 7 or 8. I'd probably give it an 8 right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. I like it
better than Bridges to Babylon. Voodoo Lounge. Let me see. I mean, yeah, I'll have to go back and listen to some of these other ones, but bottom line is for me, it sucks me in. It grabs me.
Yeah.
I listen to it. I've since it has been released, I listen to it every other day. Um, Thanks to the
Mm,
show, I listen to it more. But yeah, I like it a lot. So I
yeah.
would give it a 7 there. 7 is fair enough. Probably possibly an 8 for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not better. It's not the best album since Some Girls. It's not the best album since, like I don't know. Yeah.
yeah. I'll have to
It
go
may
back
be
and
up
listen to.
there past I mean, Tattoo You was the high point for the Rolling Stones. I'd give
Right.
this a 7 out of 10, but where does it rank as to the best album since? I need to give it a bit more spin and listen to some of those albums that were recorded in the 90s and the 2000s to give it a fair judgment. But
And
hey man,
another,
it's a solid album. It really
another
is.
thing too is, and I think we discussed this on one of our episodes, is those albums too. Even when you go back to Steel Wheels, there was still a danger to their element here,
Mm,
and there's somewhat a. I guess they're flirting with that here, but they were dangerous back even in the 80s.
yep.
That they were still a dangerous band, and that's still missing. Is it here? Is it tongue in cheek? I do think that Mick is being genuine with his lyrics,
Yeah.
but there's also that grittiness and dirtiness that
I
I'm just
miss the
thinking,
grittiness. I miss the
yeah,
grittiness,
yeah.
but it's maybe they're at a point in their lives that they've had to reassess where they are in the world.
Well, I mean,
It's probably the last Rolling Stone album.
they dropped brown sugar from their set list because of the climate today, and the cancel culture. And I'm like, I don't know if you should do that. It's like it's a kick ass, gritty, sexy song,
Yeah,
but
it is. It is.
yeah,
But anyway, as
yeah,
always, Joe, love having you on the show. So
yeah.
we sort of agreed, but we sort of disagree. But it was quite a really good chat because we took it from different angles, and that's what it's all
I
about.
believe like a lot of what you say is correct, but it doesn't bother me as much. That I think that's a
Yeah,
proper assessment. Yeah. And I think the only thing we really disagree on is the Lady Gaga song. So
there you go.
yeah.
All right, well, viewers, tell us what you think of this album. Where do you rate it in the Rolling Stones discography? What are your favorite tracks? Please check out Joe B on Waste Some Time with Average Joe. Plenty of
Yes.
content, great channel. Please like and subscribe to this little channel called Rock Daydream Nation. Click the bell. But one thing's for certain, you'll see Joe and me do a show ranting and talking about some topic or other very, very soon. Cheers.